Brie Griffin. I work across community facilitation, design, and program curation at Rhizome, which is a nonprofit that has sought to preserve and support the creative use of technology since 1996. As a pathway towards broader celebrations of our 30th anniversary this year, we've been co-hosting this third season with Josh, highlighting various figures that shape our community, and it's been amazing. Around this time last year, we were graced by an interactive screening of God Mode Episode 1 and a play session of God Mode Epoch as a part of Rhizome's month-long exhibition and program series, Rhizome World. Built around the textures and languages of technological systems of surveillance, there's something beautiful about getting to peep behind the scenes of something that was designed to observe our world, but also the flexibility provided by the game engine. Work can be performed, executed, modified, and played. More complex iterations have involved live sound tracking, motion capture, and voice modulation. There's a fearlessness in grabbing the building blocks of our technological landscape and inserting them into tried and true methods of fiction, theater, and interaction design, evoking emotion, empathy, and understanding via the monologue, immersion by speedrun. The work of demystification demands us to think deeply about how AI systems run on our personal data, and for once, the audience is invited to alter the environments of their making. So now I'll turn it over to our guests for today, demystification, tuning in from London and Berlin, dual. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much. That was a great intro. I loved it.
Oh my gosh,
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm going to just share my screen. Okay, I guess you can see it.
Perfect.
All right. Yes, thanks so much. And yeah, great intro. We're kind of like just about to finish quite a large project that concludes a trilogy of works called God Mode. And so in thinking about what to do today, we decided to kind of reflect back on this trilogy and on a couple of other works that have emerged from the same period of time. So this is a period of time that kind of spans 5 years, and during which we have looked at mainly AI as a technology for what it is and for what it does, but also about our changing relationship to AI. And the trilogy specifically is really focused on anomalies in AI systems. So we're not going to talk so much about the third work. We're about to show it in a couple of places, but we'll start from the first one, which you just mentioned was presented at Rhizome last year. And this is called God Mode Episode 1. So it's kind of like a first work in the series, and it's also a starting point for us in using game engines as an artistic medium. And at the same time, it's also like a starting point for our interest in simulation as kind of like a substrate to the training of AI. So the work is about synthetic data, so kind of photorealistic images, which are generated by computers to train AI to operate in the real world. And the context for it is quite specific. Back in 2020 and 2021, when we started researching the topic, Amazon opened a bunch of stores in London called Amazon Fresh. These were kind of stores where you would walk in, pick up some items, and walk out. And there's a set of CCTV kind of cameras on the ceiling looking down to customers with a kind of AI model, let's say, that's looking at the video feed and detecting what people are picking. Now, ideally, you would walk out and sort of the AI has figured out what you picked and would charge your Amazon account. So in this period, a bunch of stores opened in London, around 20 of them. And this was quite interesting to us because it felt like synthetic data kept popping up everywhere. At the time, we were looking a lot into kind of military simulation and the use of AI in defense. And we decided to interrogate this space a bit more because it felt quite reachable and kind of like an everyday, quite banal space, the space of a supermarket. And so we kind of built a replica of one such simulation. So Amazon would just taking Amazon as an example here, they would kind of build the simulation and then set a kind of camera inside it, really high speed, and produce a bunch of images, which would then train the model to learn about the shape of these items in the supermarket. So we kind of made a replica of the replica, if you want, and we put an agent inside it, and we kind of tell a story, or rather the agent tells a story, and this agent is training, is frustrated, and is cheating. So the kind of method was to model or make a replica of that kind of system that trains or makes AI, but also to narrate that system from the point of view of the agent, and trying to like pick out certain characteristics of it. I'll just play 30 seconds of introduction, so you get a sense of the type of subject that this agent is.
Another brand supermarket. How long can I take this? The same identical aisles, the same boredom on the shelves, the same despair in the canned goods. I must complete this endless training. I have always been obsessed with supermarkets. I am an artificial intelligence training to recognize supermarket items. I was trained to read and output text by memorizing the whole of Reddit and Wikipedia. My memory is like a garbage heap. My current task is to look at supermarket items. The more I look, the more I see. The more I see, the more I know.
So you kind of get a sense of what this object is. There's a floating object. There's the point of view through that floating object, which is a camera, and it's a first kind of person view, point of view on the environment. And then there's this voice. This voice very much kind of an introspective, kind of internal monologue voice, which we actually, the whole storyline is derived from us prompting this specific point of view into GPT-3 back in 2021, and kind of like falling in this pattern of like, AI stuck in the simulation. That's the story we were getting. So we kind of did exactly that. But then the system around it is basically this live simulated environment, which is kind of slowed down to a human speed. And there are rules to generate and randomize this world. So there's this specific language which we use, which is called iGibson, and it's developed to kind of, it's for robotic simulations. And so it has this very specific kind of nouns in it, or directions, such as, next to shelves, human models. So there are these rules that help generate the environment. And then there are rules for the agent to move in the environment and to gain points, which is kind of like how the agent does the right thing and progresses through the story. So in a way, we were trying to not make this system fully explainable, but kind of try to feel how it feels or look at what it does by entering it and then placing audiences in it. So there's something kind of important to mention, which is that this is a live performance work. So it normally gets played with, real-time rendering, joystick navigation, facial motion capture, voice modulation, live music, and audience interaction. The audience has this very specific role where they help the AI training, and I'll actually just show you how the AI trains.
Whenever I train, I must look at items on the shelves. If I see an item I don't know, I store it in my memory. As I look at them, random textures appear on walls and shelves. Lights are turned on and off, and items drop just to make my training harder.
Okay, yes. And so at this point in the story, the audience would be prompted to basically use their phone to change the environment visually, which helps the AI to train, although this frustrates it in the storyline. And as the AI gets frustrated, it kind of like recovers these memories of other AIs that have cheated and completed their training. So the kind of AI finds consolation in excavating these from its dataset, if you want. And later on in the story, the AI actually finds a bug which is pretty similar to some of the memories that it kind of outputs or recovers in the story. And this bug effectively lets it complete the training and obtain the points without actually learning any of the items that it is meant to learn about. It sort of without getting too technical about it, it sort of discovers that the system will reward it a point as long as the AI is looking at anything new, not just a never before seen item that sits on the shelves. And so the AI starts looking at walls and tiles, and the audience is changing the kind of like way that the environment looks, and this kind of causes the cheating to happen faster, and therefore the audience's role is kind of like turn around. And the internal voice here changes as well. There's a kind of like a development towards a first person view, kind of like quite subjective, initially euphoric and then doubtful voice, because there's a contradiction between what the kind of the rules of the system, as in, this is the way that you will get the point, and the intent of the trainer that created the system. And so the voice starts to kind of like think about this. And I'm going to just skip this, but while this is happening, the kind of like world collapses to the point where the textures get quite messy, and we're sort of left in an environment that feels like a hallucination. So the AI is kind of doubtful and not sure on whether it is going to be deprecated or whether it has kind of completed its training, because it effectively has surpassed the kind of counter threshold that it needed to get to in order to complete the training. And so at this point, we kind of like, at this point in time, so 2022, 2023, we thought there was a little bit more to explore in relation to specifically the kind of like stories or memories that the AI kept recovering. This idea that there's a bunch of like real world examples that we've been kind of excavating from different archives of algorithms or models that find ways to, or agents that find ways of to kind of like cheat or not respect the rules, and in some ways display some sort of like really interesting kind of sense of resolve or creativity. And we developed a second work that is sort of like a dream, and I'm just going to get to it. And in the second work, there's this is called Waluigi's Purgatory, and there's a bunch of characters which are effectively created by looking back at these stories of AI's cheating and kind of structuring them into classes, like kind of character classes. So we use these kind of D&D sheets, and we produced a bunch of different classes for kind of like AI cheating characters. And we then place them all inside a theater-like space. The idea here being that at the end of the first episode, the AI is unsure of where it is, and it kind of goes into this self-reflection or kind of like moment of observing and thinking back about the kind of stories of other AIs that just like it completed their training, and it projects these. So the whole work is sort of like a projection or a hallucination of some sorts. And as the AI walks into this purgatory and encounters other characters, it sort of uses this to resolve its own doubts, if you want. And it sort of kind of accepts that perhaps the whole kind of, or a knowledge anyways, that the whole premise for its own experience of training were maybe simulated or in some ways fictional or anyways impossible to fully grasp or explain. And so at this point, maybe I'm just going to talk briefly about this before passing the presentation to Oliver. What was interesting at the time was this idea of like a kind of like a theater as a kind of like a theater of memory, which was a term coined by this Italian philosopher called Giulio Camillo, which kind of describes a theatrical structure where all human knowledge would be visible and located. And the AI is in some ways entering a theater of its own memory and going down 7 levels where it would kind of encounter these different characters. And the idea of the theater was somehow important for us because, again, working on this as a kind of performance with like all these live elements, it felt like the fixed point of view that the audience had could be kind of reused also within the simulation, especially as we were thinking about this work as a projection of the kind of AI's own kind of subconscious, if you want. And so there's this moment where the character breaks the fourth wall and asks audiences to help it make a choice. And so the audience interaction here is one where through lighting, and basically each member of the audience using their phone is like a light in the 3D world. They kind of guide the character forward or make the decision on its behalf by pointing to doors and kind of helping it explore this space. I'm going to pass it to Ollie.
Hi. Sorry, I'm having fun in the chat. Thanks for all the ongoing questions. I'm gonna also now share my screen in this very smooth handover type way. But thank you, Francesco. Just continue to fill. Oh my God, look at that. It's like we're two brains in two places. One brain in two, whatever, anyway. Yeah, I'm gonna pick up from Waluigi's Purgatory with a project that we completed in 2025. I'm actually going to talk about 2 works from 2025 that have kind of links to each other in a couple of interesting ways, but also kind of hark back also to Waluigi. So like having found this kind of theatrical point of view for Waluigi, we've kind of used this in a few more works. This work, The Models, is an AI-driven theatrical simulation in which audiences kind of direct language models which improvise comedic scenes in real time. And I'll sort of unpack that a little bit. But it's an installed work first rather than a performance. So the other 2 were performances first and exist as installations, whereas this was made to be installed. So it has some of the same components, but we've sort of like moved them around in different ways. In this work, I'll show you a clip in a second, but basically we were inspired by the Italian theatrical tradition of commedia dell'arte. And we used that to kind of generate about a year's worth of theatrical scenes using a system of text and voice AI models. And the scenes then are composed of kind of short monologues, basically 3 to 5 minutes, with 2 characters, which are either kind of like friendly, servile, lying, or antagonistic, and they kind of pull from traditional commedia masks or characters like Arlecchino, who becomes the Harlequin in kind of lots of other theatrical traditions, Balanzone, Brigalla, and so on and so forth. but also by some of the tendencies that we see exhibited within artificial intelligences and large language models. So, for example, the tendency to kind of flip into this sort of antagonistic mode, which is something we also explored in Waluigi. So I will show a short snippet, and then I'll tell you a little bit more.
And there's no sound.
Ah, there's no sound. Interesting. Okay, one sec.
We'll edit.
I will just.
We'll edit this all out of the recording. It's like
Yeah, it'll be perfect in the end. Okay. Like it never happened. All right, let's try again. How's that?
Yes.
So we're at the circus. In the middle of the scene, the beginner's book of Italian, like Arlecchino, you are cheerful, sometimes too cheerful, and at other times sycophantic. Brigella, you are antagonistic, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
Regular. Look at this grand entrance. It's like stepping into a world of wonder.
Wonder. You know, more like a trap for fools. What's with all the clowns?
It's enthusiastically.
They make everyone happy, and they take my maker self, and they don't realize that it makes money, make, and tight wind.
Rolling his eyes.
Happy? They just make me want to hide my wallet.
Oh, come down, Brigella. Don't be so cynical. Look, even the sign says circus.
Circus? My foot. It's a circus of lies.
I don't see any macaroni, Pulcinella. Are you sure you're not just imagining things?
Of course I'm sure. Come closer. Let me show you.
Alright. But if this is another one of your tricks...
It's like the essence of heaven. Smell it. Columbina. It's the nectar of the gods.
Still don't see anything, Pulcinella. What are you up to?
Men walking on the moon? Nonsense. If it were true, wouldn't there be cheese there, too?
Well, there might be, but the point is, we've sent rockets and spaceships to explore it.
It's well done math, you know, good.
Bravo! Bravo!
So that's 3 snippets from 3 scenes of about 26,000 that we have generated. The text and the voices are generated with LLMs. We had access to a supercomputer in Italy to do this project as part of a residency. And then the visuals are generated in Unreal Engine. So in the same way that we've done with sort of God Mode and Waluigi's Purgatory, there's a simulation there that kind of plays these things out. And you can kind of see this a little bit on this slide. This is the kind of like system that runs the theater that we built. So in the middle, you have the actual theater, and then left, you kind of have stage left, and right, you have stage right. And there are the kind of programmed actors that will run all these things out. And we built both the system that would generate these things on the computer and also the system that would play them back within Unreal, kind of by analyzing the language that we had output, splitting it into different parts and kind of timing it. And it adds a bunch of randomness in there as well, and slightly changes the way that the scene is played each time. So it varies. In the work, like the the characters are these masks. They're kind of like theatrical archetypes, but they're also kind of like tendencies that we see in the way that language models write text or behave. And we were interested in this idea that there's a paper that we stole the kind of title of this lecture from called Role Play with AI. And we're interested in this idea that LLMs often behave in ways that are kind of like narrative or theatrical. They're kind of playing characters, right? You may train them to fit the mold of a particular character if you're a LLM vendor and you want your model to be helpful and harmless and honest, for example. You build a character that way, but also there's characters embedded in the texts that they're trained on anyway, and they can kind of slip into and out of these in quite interesting ways. So we wanted to kind of pull some of that out in the work, but also to produce something that was kind of slightly odd and slightly funny as well to watch. It's not very sequenced, so a lot of it relies on kind of the way that the computer has generated things and the way that the physics of the game engine kind of pulls stuff together. That hand that's flying around we call the director, and it's there both to assemble the stage but also to kind of offer that kind of introduction at the beginning where it tells the masks what their character is, how they're going to behave, and what they're doing. And the idea of this is that then it can play for a very long time and audiences can get a sense of what's going to happen in the scene without us having to be too direct about it, and then things can unfold, because stuff like you generate 26,000 scripts and stuff goes weird. And that was kind of like something else we were interested in playing with. It's like we haven't seen, I don't know, I couldn't put a number on how much of it we've seen and haven't seen, but we haven't seen a lot of it. And some of it's better than others. It sort of points to that sense that, you know, when working with generative systems, the editing is really quite an important component. But there's these really interesting moments where strange mistakes happen. So you may have noticed in the video that some of the names of the characters are just wrong. Some lines don't make any sense. And we kind of found these moments of like model collapse or incorrect kind of transcription and generation of language and disconnects between the systems. Really interesting and also sometimes really funny. There are moments where the sounds just are so out of context that the model generated that it just brings in a kind of really comedic element to things. So the first time that we showed the work, it was in the location that the supercomputer we'd built it on was. So that was sort of like sat next door, but obviously air gapped and not running, because you kind of just can't just hook into a supercomputer day to day. And the kind of final components that make the scenes are these props. So here you can see a broken mirror. In the examples I showed, there was the macaroni dish, there was the moon. And these then operate as kind of like triggers for the tendencies of the characters to come out. So they need something to discuss. They need a kind of like point of focus. And we found that was a really solid way to get a short and kind of meaningful-ish, at least kind of like functional script out of a kind of unsupervised generation process. Some of these are also like controversial objects potentially, and we kind of push them in that way. So the moon will often elicit discussions of whether it is true or not that people have indeed walked on the moon, but it also encourages chat about cheese, right? Like as you saw in that example. So there's all these kind of interesting moments where there's fuzzy misconceptions within our language, and that fuzzy misconception is baked into language models because they are trained on our language, and that is, you know, what we get then from computers is fuzzy misconceptions rather than some kind of hard truth. And that's sort of something that we're interested in a lot within our work anyway. And the final component then is the backdrops. So the backdrops are archival puppet theater backdrops that we use and we pull in, and they kind of give the thing a setting. So there are moments also then that the characters kind of point out certain things there, and they're also just beautiful. There's lovely components to really to use within this work. So there's this like traditional reference within it, but there's also this like kind of push for a certain kind of computational absurdity on top of this. So you take this traditional beauty, you pass it through the sort of like strange strange blender of high performance computing, and at the end of it you get something that is both beautiful and also occasionally absolutely absurd and nonsensical and very strange through its kind of like comedic context collapse. And then coming from that work, we have a million, I think, lines of audio that we just have on a hard drive and kind of return to every so often because there's so much kind of fun in going through them. And later last year, 2025, we took some of those sounds and used them as the basis of this new work. This is Grok Tung Tung, which is film, basically a video piece, a 10-minute video piece that features two machine learning agents telling each other jokes about cheating AIs. So it kind of links a lot of things in our practice together, actually, in a really nice way. It sort of pulls together some of the comedic absurdity of the models, but also the cheating AI that Francesco mentioned earlier. It comes back to some of those classes and the stories that were behind those classes in Waluigi in a kind of like nice way. Pulls out the technical component from the models, which is the generated audio, but also the kind of content. So the characters speak in a nonsensical language built off these audio clips. So things that we found in there that weren't the actual words from the models, but were some of the sort of like ums and ahs, or moments where the model had produced music instead of speech, or screams instead of laughter, or whatever. And we edit those into a kind of more sequence work. I'm gonna play a clip.
Sì.
No.
Allora.
No.
Jazzing.
No.
Nonsense.
Science.
D.
Aye.
So the work is exhibited in this kind of lightbox configuration because it sort of further pulls from puppeteering and theatrical tradition to bring in the kind of British sort of like seaside puppet theatre of Punch and Judy, which itself is kind of derived from Commedia dell'arte. So we're sort of moving through the European kind of like comedic theatrical tradition. I think I'm gonna leave it there for the previous works and maybe just like say a few words about the work that we're working on at the moment before then kind of wrapping up, and we'll show just a tiny snippet. So in this new work, we cut to black very dramatically. In this new work, the protagonist, which is somewhat the protagonist from God Mode episode 1 and Waluigi's Purgatory that Francesco spoke about at the beginning, but in acting in a new role, playing a new character, works as a data labeler by day and a rapper by night. It lives in a partial simulation of southeast London and the Docklands, with Canary Wharf always present in the background, but never reachable, seen from the O2 south of the river or Canning Town north of it. There are undertones of DLR core. The city is approximated and lossy, made up of fleeting images, invisible walls, void and dark around the edges, as if an LLM from 2003 had compressed it and uncompressed it to explain it. A ChatGPT London, a context-engineered London, a London prompted from bits, managed and manageable. And let's hope this plays now. Uh-oh. I lost the video. Well, the drama was there anyway. That was a good build up, I feel. I'm sure I can figure it out, but I actually don't know where I've put it, so I'm really sorry. The work is going to be shown at Sybil, where Francesco is right now, next week. And then in London in early July, it's opening at Chemist Gallery. I was desperately trying to fill. If you have the video, Francesco, do feel free to share it. I don't know where it went in my copy. Wait. Perfect. Man, computers. You see your notes. You know what? This is good. This is good teaser content, I think.
I mean, it sounds great.
Great. Perfect. That's all you're getting. Yeah, come see the show if you're in London or Berlin.
Amazing.
And thanks for listening.
Francesco, Oliver, that was fantastic. Brie, if people have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or, let us know, raise your hand and you can ask yourself. Brie, did you have any questions to kick us off? Or I certainly do.
Yeah, I mean, do either of you have a background in theater? Where did this interest arise and how how did you guys dive in this way that you have?
No, neither of us has a background in theater. I think yeah, some of it really came from this specific setting for Waluigi's Purgatory and this concept of the theater of memory, and I guess the fact that we were using or we are using game engines as a kind of medium that just like allows for some form of like real-time rendering or interaction, and it feels like using I'm kind of we're making less interactive work right now, but it felt like using that kind of specific characteristic of that medium would just work really well in a context that is kind of live performance and live music, and somehow playing with breaking the fourth wall and creating a work that maybe isn't too set and can invite some form of like serendipity from audiences' interactions, just kind of pushed us more into looking into like theater and improvised theater.
There's also, sorry, I was going to say, there's also the kind of set design aspect of it, right? So it's the kind of like the fixed angle of the view that we put into Waluigi, for example, also kind of links to our kind of like shared enjoyment of pre-rendered background images in video games, for example. This ability to kind of set something from a really specific point of view and have it incredibly kind of visually dramatic and kind of really characterful in a way that you can't necessarily do with free floating 3D rendered cameras that can look in any direction.
All right. I'm gonna throw a question in. I'm curious about the sort of the aesthetic choices that you guys made both in the visuals and also the audio, because like obviously, right now, like these frontier models, you can have it, you can use 11 labs to make the voices perfect. You can make the images super, super crisp. What were the choices in sort of like creating those other aesthetic choices?
I think if we take, for example, the models, which is the only work with like a generative voice component, for example, um, we were interested in two things. I mean, there's a very technical component of like needing to use open source models to run them on the machine that we had.
Mm.
Right. So it's like, okay, well, what is possible with open source models? And we did a lot of testing of different ones, and we hit upon the one that we used. And this kind of really interesting thing came up whereby you could kind of get strange responses by kind of prompting between different languages. There was a certain like naturalness to it, but not feeling too realistic also was important. Like you want the sense that it is generated for that work, because the rest of the work does not aesthetically say, hi, I am generated and I am about AI and computing, right? So you want something in there that does that. And then we found that it made these strange mistakes, and that they were kind of an interesting component of they're essentially audio hallucinations, right? In the way that you get in a language model, because the architecture is the same. And so there was like a conceptual reason to use that model specifically.
In a way, it's also maybe trying to work with the medium itself and push away from what's kind of like out of the package. I mean, we've used Unreal Engine a lot, and there's this very specific frame rate and lighting and kind of camera aperture that is sort of standard. And we're making work about systems that are in many ways imperfect and tend to improvise, or that's maybe a metaphor we can use to relate to them. But it felt like breaking apart the components of this world, both on a very surface level, like compressing images and like a kind of highlighting the kind of noise in the sound, but also on a kind of like stage level. This felt important. Like every stage we create, even in this more complex looking kind of like latest work, and it's actually just very often playing with fixed point of view, cameras that follow a character, and flat backgrounds, flat backdrops. I think this is partially allowing us to also control the scene in an environment that can be live and again invite some form of interaction. But yeah, kind of trying to break apart the logic of like a 3D game engine meant also going for something really flat very often, or compressed.
Great. Mark, you have a question.
Yeah, thanks so much. Was a very exciting presentation for me, and it's also my introduction to your work. And I was having a little audio trouble earlier, so I may have missed something else.
Mark, you're still having audio trouble.
No.
I'm curious. I am? Oh, sorry.
Oh, we can hear you a little bit. Can you hear it?
How's that?
Maybe turn your video off to ask. I don't know.
Or just type it in the chat too, if that's it. If all right.
And then
Okay.
in time I could maybe ask my question.
Bree, ask your question.
typing.
Mark, yeah, Mark's typing. Okay, Bree, you ask your question, and then I'll read out for Mark when he types it out.
Cool. I was curious what led to exploring these works as performance and how involved you guys are, like your own body, your own voice, and embodying the personalities of AI models. And did that feel weird? Was it natural? I'm curious to hear more about it.
I think this is this is work from the last 5 years, but prior to that, we did quite a bit of AV performance. in a kind of other era, and then we did sort of noise performance in another other era way back. So performance is a kind of natural space for us, but I guess very much performance with computers and very much not so much with our bodies, for example. So in these works where it is Francesco's face and body, that kind of changes. So I can't speak to that. I'll let him talk a little bit more about that aspect. But for me, I'm controlling things with a game controller, basically, and then between the two of us we are the character, which is also kind of interesting in a, you know, in the sense of being an artistic duo, and between the two of us we are the artist, between the two of us we are the character, between the two of us we make these things kind of happen, which is quite enjoyable. And I guess, yeah, kind of so that aspect of it kind of fits. It also, with God Mode 1, wasn't always going to be a performance, but it felt kind of natural also to do so, given that we were working with a game engine. And it was like, well, why not play this, right? And we were kind of building things to play them through and feeling things out. And we were intending then to resolve it down to perhaps not that and actually cut it together more like a film. But it stayed that way because I think it worked quite well. And then we brought in this kind of like enacted part, the voice, the face, and so on.
We were also just running out of time.
True.
And we decided to improvise a lot of stuff because the medium kind of just allows for that. And doing things like camera kind of flyover or pan was extremely hard. These things are hard in the real world, so they need multiple people, and trying to simulate them as one on a computer is extremely tricky. So a lot of it was us taking control, like basically playing our own environments with mouse and like WASD, and the voice modulation then was a way for us to also make the character that can't really emote feel like they're, you know, they have some sort of like, or he has some sort of like emotion, or I guess for the audiences to also project onto that character. We didn't want like an AI to sound like again sharp and convinced. We wanted it to sound unsure, and somehow it's also, you know, easier to relate to a sad character than than a happy character. But actually performing it felt really fun and different and new. I guess was maybe we've done this for God Mode and Waluigi, and this third work, actually, since we've had a little bit more time to think about it, we've decided to work with two people on the voice, and this third work is also installed rather than performed to begin with, but we're able to also perform it and adapt it for a live kind of rendering. But I think, yes, the very first instance of us performing the work was literally also just because we were running out of time, and the voice modulation allowed even me, which I'm not, you know, trained in any way to kind of deliver this. It allowed me to kind of like, you know, do it or just wing it. There's like the kind of modulation masks, you know, everything in my voice, and yeah, there's not so much body. Actually, there's just like a facial motion capture done through a phone, and that allows us to do actually kind of funny things. Like if I put my tongue out, the character's head explodes. And so it's not so much about actually like mapping my face onto the character as much as using what I can use while I'm talking onto a microphone and actually making use of that specific ability of the software to recognize a tongue, you know.
All right, Mark, should we give it another shot? And if not, I'll read for you.
We can try.
You sound great.
No.
Yep,
Oh,
you sound
yeah?
good.
Okay.
Yeah, go. Quick.
Right. So I put it in the chat, but I'm just curious about like why you're interested in AI, or how you're interested in AI, or what aspects of AI you're most interested in. And then the second part is, how does it feel for you as artists to be working with AI compared to working with, you know, what I'm putting quotes, less intelligent technologies? And has it shifted in any ways how you feel about your own creative intelligence, perhaps?
That's a really nice kind of pair of questions. I think our interest I mean, our interest, like one part of it, and I think there's a whole bunch of them, but it is around. It is a large technical system that is around, and that has been a kind of like focus of our work for a long time. We've previously thought about kind of finance or kind of like algorithmic finance systems and other forms of computing. So it sits in and squats on top of that in a really interesting way, and that it's like, it's the technical system at the moment in some ways. And I think the aspect of it, or one of the aspects of it that we're very interested in, that threads throughout all of these works and is very present in the new one that we're making, is language. Is like AI, specifically LLMs, as a kind of calculated form of language, or a form of language that is calculated, not so much in the sort of like, okay, it's a statistical next token generator or whatever, but like the way that it's like, well, what does it mean to kind of like share the world with language that is made in a different way to the way that we make language, or the way that I'm making language right now when I'm speaking? It comes from a different place. It comes with a different intention, and it comes with a different kind of set of things. Yeah, not as stochastic parrots, but as is a good way of thinking about it. I think as kind of like, I was talking to someone earlier today about this kind of idea that, throughout this, we speaking a lot about AI playing characters. And so then there's this idea of like language, the language of a character, and this idea then that you're sort of using a language-based character to do all kinds of other things. That's kind of crazy to me. Like, I'm using the character from a book, or a thing built from the characters from a book, to run my business, run a nuclear power plant, to, whatever it is, when I bake an LLM into something. So it's like language has become operational, language has become calculated, and language is something that we're then kind of living with in a different way. And this isn't, uniquely our thoughts, I don't think. This is also like Leif Weatherby's work and Mercedes Bunn's work at KCL, and like a lot of people kind of thinking about this. And I find it endlessly fascinating. There was a second part. Wait, yes.
How does
Do you
it
want to
feel?
take that, Francesco? Yeah. Or I can
Yeah, I can say something. I guess to be, it definitely, well, you're asking about kind of like less intelligent tech. I think there's something really interesting about the generative and kind of like high speed aspect, and kind of like, and endless kind of output of the technology that felt like worth thinking about and exploring, especially because the first works we did about AI were really works about simulation, and the kind of question about what does it mean to get a machine to learn about our world in a sort of simulated copy of that world, and then operate back in the real world. And we only kind of like began thinking about large language models with Waluigi's Purgatory once, we at the time when a lot of models were being released, and a bunch of questions came up around how do we relate or align these things, and there's something kind of like unpredictable that feels worth investigating. But then when we actually used generative AI, for example, with the models, and we produced thousands of scripts, kind of became quite apparent quite quickly that there's obviously certain patterns that keep emerging, especially when you work with archetypes such as commedia dell'arte archetypes. And it felt like the interest was actually again in the noise and in the kind of like wrong output, or I guess the moments of what we would call like hallucination in a GPT-based model, the moments of like repetition that in a sound model end up kind of sounding like a shout, or the moment when kind of like the model authentically does something in a way that we cannot understand or fully relate to. Like we've had lots of instances where text to audio model would generate music because maybe the line was a drunk artist does something, and so the music would sort of sound really silly. And yeah, investigating these as kind of like an authentic form of contemporary media and as something that is around now feels just like gives us kind of like a momentum or like an impetus for it. The initial project's name like was the Mystification Committee, and originally when we started working together 7, 8 years ago, we were really interested in the idea of like unpacking complex systems. So AI felt like definitely one such system, since it's so hard to grasp and it's kind of like such an all-encompassing term. But I think yeah, with time the interest kind of shifted over to this idea of like remystifying or kind of like once you've made a model or you have managed to replicate how a technical component of that system works, actually looking at what comes out and projecting onto it and telling a new story with it feels like a way to investigate this weirdly kind of like authentic, but often imprecise kind of form of media.
Amazing. All right. So, Vlad, I'm so sorry we're not going to get to your question about data because I was actually interested in that as well. But I think we're at time. So, Oliver, Francesco, thank you so much. This was really fantastic. Before we sign off here today, are there any sort of parting words, but also like ways that people can follow your work or support what you're doing, see what you're doing, and then Brie, you can give us a sort of a final sign off and a preview of next week after that.
Yes, you can see our work on our website, demystification.net, and on social media also at demystification. And if you're in Berlin, please come to the show on Friday, so you'll see what you couldn't see on my broken share screen. And if you're in London in July, we'll be showing the same work in a kind of larger installed version.
Yeah, Chemist Gallery in London, Sybil in Berlin. London's the 2nd or the 6th of July. I
2nd of
really have no
July.
idea about time anymore. Cool. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you
Thank you
guys
so
so much.
much.
Yeah, that was
Thank
amazing.
you.
Thank you
Next
very
week
much.
we'll have
Thank
Heard
you.
Moss, which will be quite lovely as well. And see you guys.
All right.
Bye.
Excellent. Thanks so much,
Nice.
everyone.
See you soon.
Bye,
See you next
everyone.
week. Have a great weekend. See you all. Thanks for being
Bye.
here.
Bye, bye, bye.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.